Funding for New Mexico in Focus provided by the McCune Charitable Foundation. And viewers like you.
This week on New Mexico in Focus, reaction from Indian country to Deb Haaland's historic confirmation as head of the Interior Department.
I mean, you hear it a lot, representation matters, but you could feel it. You could actually feel it.
Plus, setting the stage for the issues that will define the final hours of the 2021 legislative session. New Mexico in Focus starts now. Thanks for joining us this week. I'm your host, Gene Grant. The state practically stopped on Monday afternoon as Deb Haaland made history, becoming the first Native American to serve as Secretary of the Department of the Interior. She's also the first Native American to serve in any presidential cabinet. We'll get reaction to her confirmation from Indian country as well as our Line Opinion panel. The Line will also talk about what's passed so far in the 2021 legislative session and what issues are racing the clock. And we'll catch up with Jonathan Goldstein of the Environmental Defense Fund as we continue to gather thoughts and opinions about President Biden's climate change plans. But as usual, we begin with the Line in the last frantic hours of a one-of-a-kind legislative session. It's not unusual for the action to come down to the wire at the end of any legislative session, and 2021 is no different. As we tape this week's show, there are still huge issues yet to be decided and a handful of historic measures that have already been signed by the governor. Here to help us break it all down is our Line Opinion panel for this week, starting with regular and former state senator Dee Dee Feldman. Senator Dianne Snyder is back with us. She's also, as I mentioned, a former state senator and is used to this sprint to the finish line in Santa Fe for sure. Rounding out our trio of former lawmakers is Eric Griego, who also served in our state Senate. And we will get back Merritt Allen. She may not be a senator, but she does own Vox Optima, a public relations firm. Thank you all for joining us this week via Zoom. Senator Feldman, as we are talking right now, here are just a few of the proposals that hang in the balance. Cannabis legislation, early childhood education funding, tax and redistricting reform, mandatory paid sick leave, the list goes on and on. Do any of these issues risk just being lost to time? Let's start there. Given how much of it is left, what are you afraid of getting left off?
I think they're all at risk of being defeated for the lack of time. And the process is such that each one of these issues is subject to a filibuster at this point. And so a filibuster on one brings three others down. So that means that the leadership has got to prioritize which ones of these are the most important. And remember that there are hundreds of other bills besides just the ones that you've mentioned, right, that are equal, that are important to certain constituencies and actually may have to be enacted in order to access federal funds or comply with a law. So this just brings to my mind the absolute influence and control that committee chairs have during the last week of the legislative session. If you delay a bill in a committee, like a judiciary committee, for example, that means the chances of not just the bill that you are delaying does not get passed, but it also completely jeopardizes the 100 other bills that are in your committee on your agenda, and also the 80 other bills that are on either the Senate or the House floor. So this is born of a process that really does not give enough time for thorough consideration of legislation.
Mm-hmm. We could tackle that on another show, the idea of how to do all this in a session. Senator Griego, let's go right to HB 12, the recreational marijuana bill. We just might as well go there. Passed out of Senate Judiciary early Thursday morning, as we all know, but the chairman, Joe Cervantes, says the bill, quote, is still not ready. And I sense an epic showdown on the Senate floor. What are you sensing?
Yeah, as we tape this, it is not on the Senate agenda for Thursday. So when this airs on Friday, it will likely have been scheduled, but there's no guarantee, to Dee Dee's point, that I think the leadership knows that the more controversial bills like this one are likely to be very, very long debates.
Right.
potentially used as a filibuster by opponents, in this case of the Republicans. There's two other really important bills that I think could be victims of a too long a debate on HB 12.
Please.
The paid sick leave bill, which is also on the schedule for Thursday, so that will also be a long, controversial debate, and some business groups really want to use that to hold some other bills hostage, unfortunately, because they strongly oppose it. But I think folks are hoping that gets out. The one bright note, just because as we tape this, it looks like HJR 1, the constitutional amendment to provide funding for early childhood. There was a huge compromise, first time in the history of this bill after 10 years, to put some money into K-12 and some money into early childhood. That looks like that's going to pass. So probably by the time this airs, my prediction is that that will have passed the Senate, which is a massive victory for a lot of folks who've been working on that for 10 years.
Long time, exactly right. Senator Snyder, the Senate, I'm curious your opinion here. The Senate has a new look, as we know, and we've talked about that a lot. And have you noticed the 11 new members, new committee leadership are all impacting how business is being done? Do you sense something is more efficient, it's better? What's your sense of how, the new look is doing this session?
I think the new look has contributed greatly to as Senator Munoz said, the increased animosity between the parties. And maybe he was speaking only about Senate Finance, but I think if you look at it, in addition to all the new members, which makes a difference always, the leadership, out of the 7 leadership positions in the Senate, only one has prior experience in Linda was actually a caucus leader, but they have no leadership experience.
I'm sorry, who are you mentioning? My fault.
I'm sorry, Linda, Senator
Lopez. Okay, gotcha.
Had some, but she's the whip now. One of the things that I think helped the Senate in past years, whether you like the outcome or not, was the mutual compatibility between the leaders. And in this case, I know Senator Griego is happy, and this was part of the turnover. You had the President Pro Tem, who was dear friends and respectful of the Senate, Senator Engel, but you also had Senator Bill Payne, who everybody admired and respected. And then you had people on the Democrat side working I just believe you had a better opportunity in those days to reach a compromise or help get a bill brought forward than it is right now. And I think I feel quite sorry for Senator Worth. All of this is being handed to him and hitting on the head with him. And I think he's doing an incredible job at what he's done so far. But I do think that makes a big difference. But I don't think, other than passing the bills, the constitutional amendment for early childhood monies and K through 12, I think those kinds of bills, which are now passed because of the change in the body of the Senate, there are still people on both sides who aren't happy about that.
That's a good point.
And don't feel, by Senator John Arthur Smith, and Senator Mary Kay Papen, whether you like them or not, they were well respected. So, and it was their voting that took them out. So, but you don't have that relationship that we had in the past. So I think there's still some animosity or concern.
Probably so. Let me ask Merritt. Let me ask you this: redistricting reform, another big issue. You're involved with this one for sure. We still have 2 bills at play, but the front runner now doesn't address everything the task force suggested last year, and Speaker Egoff has been a little less than supportive of relinquishing, any power in this once in a decade responsibility. What's your sense of where this stands now with SB 15 and others on redistricting?
I think it's very difficult to say. I sat in and testified at the House Judiciary hearing last week, and Senator Snyder's point is straight on. The animosity is there. What's very clear to me is the Democratic caucus will not let any good governance bill that has a Republican's name on it go forward. And I think it's too bad because
Who's the block there? Is it Mr. Egolf? Is it who? Do you want to name names? Who's blocking this?
absolutely. I think the speaker feels his hand has been forced. He made some unfortunate comments that have come back at him. I think he feels defensive. He took every opportunity to co-brand, particularly Representative Dow, who's been very vocal in support of redistricting, to co-brand her with the January 6th insurrection at the Capitol. If he could have images of her and Couey Griffin with their arms around each other, it would make him very happy. I don't think that's appropriate. I think it would make a lot of sense to align the bill, the redistricting bill, with amendments to the For the People Act that is in the U.S. Senate right now. As we were talking before the show, it is going to be hard to get 60 votes in the Senate on that, but It is what the congressional Democrats want. It is what seems to be the desire of the New Mexico State Democratic Party. And the two bills, there's a House bill, there's a Senate bill. Senate Bill 15 still needs to be amended to acknowledge tribal boundaries, eliminate the use of partisan data in drawing maps, and to be truly neutral with regard to considering incumbents and to simply prevent gerrymandering. House Bill 211 has that language already in it, has the support of a large number of both Republicans and Democrats. But to earlier points, this is where committee chairmen become very powerful. Right. And it's doubtful whether it will get to the floor. And this is also where it's hard with our very short-term part-time legislature, is what really has to happen in the 21 legislature is a budget and redistricting. Right. And one of those things is at risk right now.
That's a good point. Let me go to budget. Senator Griego, as of this taping right here, as we're doing this Thursday midday, we don't have yet a final budget approved, but it's close. It looks like it's going to be about $7.4 billion, which is the number we've been hearing for a while, an increase of about 5%. But most of those increases are federal bucks to handle, pandemic relief. What's your sense of how we've handled, starting with the governor and whoever else you want to bring into this, but how we've established and fighting for this particular budget line?
Well, the one big story is there has been, I think, the Democratic leadership, despite some of the rhetoric you hear from some of the business lobbyists, have bent over backwards to provide aid for small businesses and for the business community, loans, grants. A huge part of the budget is not just using federal aid, but using a lot of state money to sort of backstop all the struggles that local businesses and state businesses, all said and done between federal and state money, it's close to $1 billion that's being given to businesses. And that's been contrasted with how much of that has been set aside for workers who've been really most impacted on COVID, for example. So I think the budget is I think it's a moderate budget. Certainly, there's a huge amount that's staying in reserves. I think some folks would have liked to see more of that invested in helping workers adjust to this economy, some additional assistance for families. We're probably going to talk about the tax bill, but certainly the tax bill could have been much more strong in terms of helping working families. There were some victories there, the working families tax credit, the LIFTR to help sort of folks who are struggling in this economy. But I think part of the narrative is, despite what the complaints from some of the corporate lobbyists, I think that overwhelmingly a huge amount of this budget is dedicated to help businesses through this very, very tough time. And I think there's been a modest increase for a lot of public spending and investments in not just public sector employees, but public investments in things like healthcare. So overall, I think it's a budget that I think reflects the chairmanship of the Finance Committee, which is, let's make sure we take care of a lot of the businesses who will be affected. And then on tax policy, I think we could have been a bit more aggressive. I think the tax reform bill 291 was pretty good. But I think we certainly could have asked more from corporations, more from the wealthiest New Mexicans, and given more. Capital gains, for example, was sort of really reduced, that tax increase. I think we could have asked more from those who are doing the best in this economy and tried to help families and kids a little bit more.
have to end that there. That's an interesting last note for right now. We're back in a moment to handicap the field of candidates interested in running to replace Deb Haaland in Congress. Secretary Haaland addressed the U.S. House of Representatives for the last time as a member on Tuesday, a day after the historic vote that made her the first Native American to hold a cabinet-level position in the U.S. government. That vote reverberated throughout New Mexico, especially in Indian country. In her address to the House, Secretary Haaland highlighted her work on climate change, voting, racial justice, and COVID-19 relief. Those are all key issues to tribes, but her new role is also significant. A Native woman leading the department in charge of public lands and upholding treaty and trust responsibilities. This week, correspondent Antonia Gonzalez shares some reaction from the Native community.
Governor Janelle Roybal, Stephanie Poston, and Alicia Corriz, welcome to New Mexico in Focus. Well, former Congresswoman Deb Haaland, now Madam Secretary, mentioned this week that rarely seeing Native women hold federal leadership roles. Well, now that's changed. Governor Roybal, your pueblo is leading the way with a female executive branch. And as a tribal leader, how does Haaland's government position resonate with you?
Well, we're excited. Every day within our communities, we continue to strive for excellence, and give everything our all to succeed. And my pueblo, the Pueblo Puac, is so excited to have a Native American in this position because, diversity is very important to us, and having a voice from all ethnicities is a must. So we're all heard, we're all part of the decision making. We all face challenges on a daily basis, have obstacles we have to get through to make changes within our respective communities that, technically benefit all of us as a whole. And having Deb Haaland as our Secretary of the Interior makes us all so proud and hopeful for great things to come.
And Stephanie, you have a connection to Secretary Haaland. You helped plan a big event in DC when she first came into office in Congress. What was going through your mind when you were watching her being confirmed?
It was very exciting. And it was surreal. I mean, that whole thing, you hear it a lot, representation matters, but you could feel it. You could actually feel it and be a part of it. And you could see that she came from humble beginnings, just like us. She came from one of the pueblos. She comes from Laguna. She is a proud New Mexican. And it was just a really exciting day. And all of New Mexico should be proud and happy.
And what was the response from the Pueblo Youth Council?
Okay, so within the All Pueblo Council of Governors Youth Committee, we are a part of the, the overarching All Pueblo Council of Governors, which is comprised of our 20 Pueblo nations, each with, its inherent government authority and sovereignty over their lands. And so our mission is to advocate, foster, protect, and encourage the social, cultural, and traditional well-being of our Pueblo nations. And so seeing as, the youth committee is one of those primary focuses in our communities, and just to have a really great role model available for us, and to see that with strength and determination that Pueblo women can rise and overcome the obstacles that we encounter on a daily basis. And so it's within that, it's just really, phenomenal. And our youth committee is actually comprised of all Pueblo young women. And so it's really great to have that, what we lovingly call Auntie Deb, available for us in the Secretary of Interior, and, also just another Pueblo woman on their rise to leadership.
And Secretary of Haaland does carry her Pueblo knowledge. Why is that important, Governor?
That's what we grow up with. So it's not something that goes away. We continue on with our younger generations, teaching them. And if we didn't have that moving forward and, use that to help us get, our voices out and how we live and our everyday living, I think that we wouldn't be as far as we are today. I think we've came a long way by by being true to ourselves and who we are, and letting everyone know that that's how we stand.
And Stephanie?
As Pueblo people, we're the original stewards of the land. I mean, I was fortunate enough to work for my own tribe, and I know that they really take it serious in protecting water and protecting resources and protecting sacred sites. And you just know that with all those efforts for years that perhaps our uncles, our grandfathers worked on, that they stand a fighting chance now with somebody who truly understands the meaning of that. And that's not only for our own benefit as Native people, that sort of protection, that commitment to preserving lands will benefit all of the globe.
And is that the same for young people?
Yes, of course. Engaging within our communities, we can certainly see that our community is linked through intergenerational teachings. And so, not only with each story comes, cultural revitalization, but continues to carry a teaching along with it. And so certainly with, Representative Holland or Secretary Holland, carrying that knowledge along with her, we can certainly see that it will help to provide some strength and guidance within the coming obstacles that she will have to face in her new position. And so I strongly believe that, our traditions, our knowledge, and our language, of course, carry so much strength and power.
And Governor, as a tribal leader, there is going to be a lot of work to do for Secretary Holland, but how do you hope that she takes a federal approach to tribal issues, especially ones that are so dear to your tribe?
She's a very strong lady. You can see that right away. And so I think just having that voice representing us, and as everyone else has mentioned, we all want the same thing. It's not just for us Native people, it's for the whole community. And I think maybe it's not taken in certain ways as we want it to be out there. And if we don't have that voice there to make that statement, to explain our situation and let them know our struggles and what we fight for, then we're kind of left out, So now that we have that voice there and that support, that's just going to benefit all of us as a whole.
There is, like we said, a lot of issues to tackle, not only with tribal issues, but public lands and taking care of the land are also important to Indigenous people across the United States. And Stephanie, for you as a business leader, a mother, a member of the Native community locally, people are going to be watching the Secretary and watching her every move. How do you see Indian country holding her accountable as she goes on to this new position?
I think with positions like that, you go into it knowing that you have to make hard decisions, and sometimes they might not sit well with folks. And I think it's important that we know that ahead of time. And, it's taken a very long time to get to this point of having the first ever Native American at a cabinet level. And so allow that grace, allow that patience as she maneuvers and makes pathways forward for not only us as Native people, but for the country.
And Governor, do you have anything to add to that as consultations with the Interior Department and just even being able to have the ear of the Secretary and holding her accountable for some of those tough decisions she may have to make?
Yes, I definitely can see, us having many conversations. We have several struggles just, here in New Mexico with our, water rights, our land preservation. We have historical sites and the fracking. We want to protect all that land, and I think we all have the same agenda right now. And so I definitely can see us moving forward in a positive way and helping each other, all of us as a group, staying together and moving forward as one.
I know this week has been such not only a history in the making for one of the first Congress women to to be in Congress. There's also Sharice Davids, who is in Congress. So Holland made history, becoming now the first cabinet secretary, Native American and female. There's a lot of celebration, so much excitement across Indian country, for sure here in New Mexico. And I know that the youth committee is planning a big celebration. What is that?
Yes, that's correct. So, in light of our new cabinet secretary, Holland, recent accomplishments, the youth committee has recommended to our 20 Pueblo governors to help celebrate our new interior secretary. And that will be through a virtual event led by the youth committee, similar to a celebration held previously by APCG when Deb Haaland was became one of the first 2 Indigenous Congress representatives in 2018. And so as of this time, we are in the planning stages. A resolution will be considered by the council to help initiate the formal process into carrying out this historic celebration, which will include an op-ed sharing to the public the perspective of Pueblo youth. We hope to have this open to the public via online platform. And so we also hope to call on our New Mexico congressional delegation to help provide remarks, as well as to provide a space for APCG to celebrate Secretary Haaland's achievements. And, of course, in true Pueblo fashion, to have this be an intergenerational celebration amongst Pueblo governors, tribal leaders, elders, youth, and community members.
And I know everybody is so excited about this historic confirmation, and now Madam Secretary, and like you said, Auntie Deb, people feel such a connection to her, even if they're not from New Mexico. Just want to thank you all for being with us, but also just end with some messages. Steph, let's start with you, Stephanie. What would you like to tell Madam Secretary?
Thank you for paving the way. Thank you for leaving the ladder down. Be strong. And we know that you're going to do a great job.
I would always also want to say, thank you for wanting to get into that position, knowing what it was going to be and how hard it was going to be to get in there, and what we were going to want from you, or expect you to do for us. I mean, that's a lot to take on, and we're here to support you, and I know you're going to do awesome, and we're just so humbled and honored to be a Native American just like her.
I guess my message to Auntie Deb will be to first off, congratulations on your recent appointment. Certainly we as Pueblo women see the, limited opportunities we have in order to be in leadership. And so I commend you for taking this, taking the jump to pursue this opportunity, and certainly, leaving the ladder down for those to follow. You certainly are a remarkable role model for this generation and the forthcoming generations to come. And so congratulations, and we wish you wellness, strength, and as much guidance as you can within this position and its all of its decision-making processes.
Thank you all for being with us here on New Mexico in Focus.
Thank you.
Indigenous communities were not alone in marking the historic moment of Deb Haaland's confirmation. Nearly the entire state stopped to watch the vote and take note of its importance, and that includes all of our line opinion panelists. And Diane, let's start with you. We know that policy-wise you have concerns with Ms. Haaland in the interior, but what did that moment mean to you personally?
Personally, absolutely personally, I was so excited. First, that she was from New Mexico. Two, that she was a woman, and that she was Native American. All of those came into being. They have all played, obviously, a big role in my life. And I think she has not, but I do, as you said, have concerns about some of her positions and things she has advocated for as our Congresswoman. But I remember in the hearing, the committee hearing, she was very clear, because she was questioned on this, is that the things that a congresswoman from New Mexico would advocate for and be very vocal about would not always be the same things and same role of a secretary, because she had the responsibility of the whole nation. So I'm feeling optimistic. It kind of touched my heart to see that happen. I don't know why, but it did. And I hope that, quite truthfully, she lives up to all those expectations that I have of her. And I think I have many friends who feel the same way. We want it to work because oil and gas and extractive industries are so important to us in our state. And I know she has to follow the advocacy of the president, but I think she has always, I love her saying is about, being brave, and what is the word she uses? Fierce. Is I hope that she is nicely fierce when she knows that the best thing for the country may disagree perhaps a little bit with the president.
That's a good point.
I've seen her act that way on other bills, whether I liked her position or not. But I'm hoping that fierceness will continue to play as she becomes the secretary.
I like that. Senator Feldman, let me ask you this. The clock has immediately started, of course, to replace Ms. Holland in Congress. Secretary of State Maggie Toulouse-Oliver has now scheduled a special to replace her for Tuesday, June 1st. We have a date. The candidates will be chosen by the political parties. A lot of people don't know this, by the central committees. Do you like that process?
No, I don't. There is a bill in the legislature now that would replace it with a primary election, but it doesn't have time to pass unless it has an emergency clause on it, and that just doesn't look like it's going to come to pass. I want to remind you and everyone that the last time a Democratic Central Committee nominated an insider to run in a special election, they lost. They lost unexpectedly to a Republican. This happened, I think it was 1998 in northern New Mexico, which is a solidly Democratic district, when Bill Redmond won against the Central Committee appointed candidate Eric Cerna. And it also happened again, maybe that was 99. In 98, when Phil Maloof was selected by the Democratic Central Committee, he lost to Heather Wilson, which I'm sure you remember well.
Yes.
So, there's a risk at having nominees selected this way, but time is short. And so if you want to make sure that New Mexico is not deprived of a vote for the next several months, it's important to do it quickly.
Senator Griego, 9 Democrats are in. I've got a list here. We've all got a list in front of us. 1 independent and Aubrey Dunn and a couple of Republicans. Let's talk about the Democrat side of the deal. With what Senator Feldman's saying, with a short time period, but you're being chosen, does that give a natural advantage to anybody on that list that you see out there?
Normally it would, but there's several well-known Democratic, there's 4 legislators, 3 state reps and a state senator who are like at the top of the heap, very diverse. I think the difference between what Senator Feldman and Didi said and this election is we have some really strong candidates. I have to say, these are folks who are a lot of women of color, really strong legislative records, a state senator, we have the governor's kind of legislative person. So this is a strong field. No offense to Phil Maloof. I went to high school with him. Nice guy, but he was not exactly our strongest candidate as a Democrat, just to be really frank. And, Eric Cerna had a major scandal that was the real reason that we lost. Yep. So I think for most of these candidates, really strong background, very diverse. I'm really proud that we have this incredible field of candidates because there's several of them who are very, very strong, who definitely could hold the seat in the general election. So I feel like there's a couple of newcomers who I don't think really have much of a shot, but I'm glad they're jumping in. But I think there are no less than 5 formidable, serious candidates on the Democratic side. I won't speak to the Republican side because I think I'll defer to my colleagues on the panel, but I can tell you it's a pretty strong field on the Democratic side.
Mm-hmm. And all of them, I'm pretty sure, can know that COLA stands for cost of living adjustment. You might remember that from Phil Maloof's run. He didn't quite get that right, and that was a big problem for him back then.
He was a big fan of COLA, though.
That's right. Merit Republicans, we got to talk about this. Mark Morris is in. He's super conservative, certainly. Eddie Aragon, the radio host, very conservative. Aubrey Dunn is running as Aubrey Dunn, no party affiliation. But from the two folks that are affiliated with the Republican side of the deal, what's your sense of it?
Well, I think Senator Moore's stepping into the race really makes it competitive in the general election for Republicans. Senator Moore's has proven electability in the Albuquerque metro area, which is what is needed to win this seat. So Republicans have had a very difficult time picking up. They've lost on nearly all of their legislative seats. Mark Moores has shown he can win legislative races in the Albuquerque metro, which the GOP has not been able to do in recent years. And that's what's needed.
Is the timing right for him? I mean, I'm not trying to be cute here. I'm saying it might be. As Senator Feldman mentioned, no one can write off any Republican at this point. So does he have the right message? Is he the right conservative at this point?
I think so, because when you say he's very conservative, I think he's very conservative in a pre-Trump sort of way. Okay. Because there's actual conservatism and there's Trump conservatism, and I'm not even sure what that is. It's mostly populist. It's a lot of shadow. And I'm not sure that that's going to play well and particularly it's the Albuquerque metro that has to be won.
That's a good point.
And without a primary, you don't really have to get the loud fringes to carry you over. So if he's looking for the business vote and the business owner vote, who may be reeling from this legislative session with some of the progressive measures that have moved forward, I think that could put the general election over to Senator Morse.
Interesting. Senator Grego, we've got about a minute and a half here. There's other names floating out there. I mean, Albuquerque Mayor Tim Keller, Attorney General Hector Balderas, State Auditor Brian Colon. I mean, there's a lot of folks that we're sort of, in the media yapping about. I'm not quite sure how serious they are. Do you expect any other big names to jump in on the D side?
No, that ship has sailed. I mean, in the process, at least as I understand it, it's way beyond that. And none of those folks really, they've all looked at it. Maggie Toulouse Oliver looked at it, but I think they've all decided that it's not the right time. And they all have other aspirations. I think this is going to be kind of a messy process, and but it may yield a really interesting candidate, a fresh face in terms of someone out of the legislature, or maybe someone who hasn't been in elected office. We'll see.
Let's see what happens with that bill Senator Feldman mentioned the next time it comes around. I think the voting public would have a much different opinion about how these folks are chosen if they have a chance to get in on it. But we'll be back to take another stab at this one soon. Still ahead this week, the conundrum of oil and gas drilling here in New Mexico. Here at New Mexico in Focus, we're continuing to talk about how the Biden administration's plans for action on climate change might affect New Mexicans. This week, RLN correspondent Laura Paskus talks with John Goldstein of the Environmental Defense Fund. Mr. Goldstein works on oil and gas issues, including how to reduce methane emissions from that industry. He was also Cabinet Secretary of the New Mexico Energy, Minerals, and Natural Resources Department under former Governor Bill Richardson.
John Goldstein, welcome. The Biden administration came out with an executive order on climate change just days after taking office. A month into the presidency, roughly now, what pieces are moving forward that you think will affect New Mexicans?
Well, certainly, there's been a lot of talk around the leasing pause. And, that I think, unfortunately, a lot of the talk around it has been, I think, in an unhelpful frame, not recognizing all the lands that have already been sort of, put on the backlog by the oil and gas industry. And I think how small of an impact in the short term that's really going to have as far as, drilling activity goes in New Mexico. I think nationwide, there are 13 million acres that have been leased and are sitting idle. In New Mexico, I think it's over 1 million acres that are sort of sitting there idle. And so I think that while it's been getting a lot of attention, I don't think it's going to have the big impact in the in the short term that some have been fearing. I guess what strikes me too is that this is sort of the latest macro signal from the federal government and from the world market as well, that we're starting to really take climate change seriously. And I think it really underlines the importance of the efforts that the state has begun under Governor Lujan Grisham to really get better guardrails in place, to get action in place to cut methane, to address climate change on the economy-wide scale, because it's really going to be necessary for New Mexico's products to continue to have access to these world and national markets.
So Biden also ordered a review of a Trump administration rule that loosened an earlier regulation regarding methane. Do you have a sense of what that review could include?
Yeah, I think that, what we'd like to see is, number one, a return to the rules that were put in place under the Obama administration back in 2016. There was both an EPA rule for new sources and a rule from the Bureau of Land Management that reduced methane waste from new and existing wells on federal and tribal lands. And those were both, important efforts. At the same time, I think most observers expect the Biden administration to take the next step and actually strengthen those and, get existing source standards in place from the Environmental Protection Agency, for example. A lot's happened in the last 4 years. So just kind of turning back the clock to 2016 and getting those rules back in place is good, but we also need to, reflect all the stuff we've learned in the past 4 years as far as where the improvements need to come.
And can you remind us, what is methane and why is that such an important part of this larger discussion?
Yeah, it's a great point. So methane is the primary component of natural gas. The gas you use to heat your home or to cook your food is primarily made up of methane molecules. And so methane is also a very, very powerful greenhouse gas. Pound for pound, it's more than 80 times more potent at driving climate change in the short term than carbon dioxide. And so what that means is when there are methane leaks, and there are a significant amount of them in New Mexico from oil and gas wells, both in the Permian and up in the San Juan Basin, when you can address those and keep that methane in the pipes and not escaping out into the atmosphere, you can have a significant impact both on terms of revenue to the state, since you're collecting your tax and royalty off of that, as well as protecting the climate from drought and the kinds of impacts New Mexico is already starting to see.
So as I understand it, Colorado has a methane rule that the federal government is actually perhaps looking at as a model. Can you talk a little bit about what Colorado has done in terms of methane and what examples there might be for the federal government and for us here in New Mexico?
So Colorado's had methane rules in place since 2014. It was the first state in the U.S. to enact rules. That was under Governor Hickenlooper. And it has, they've been successful in terms of, reducing emissions. Methane also, when you're addressing methane at a well site, you're also addressing the forms of pollution that lead to ozone and smog. And so they're also good, important rules from a public health perspective. And so the 2014 rules have been good and successful in Colorado. They've also improved them twice since then. They've gone back and continued to raise the bar. And what's been interesting to see is that those 2014 rules, they were supported by some members of industry. There were 3 large oil and gas producers in Colorado that were a part of that and supported those. But they weren't supported by the Colorado Oil and Gas Association, the trade association that represents the whole industry. Since then, the improvements that the Colorado regulators have made have been endorsed by COGA, the Oil and Gas Association. So it's interesting to see that sort of progression, and it makes me wonder if there's potential for something similar in New Mexico with these industry players, like I mentioned before, are seeing how the market is shifting and changing, and seeing that they need to put real meaning behind reducing their emissions and reducing their impact on the climate and on public health. And so I think, the more forward-leaning ones are realizing the importance of getting on board with state and federal regulations, like the Lujan Grisham administration is working on, like the Biden administration is starting to dive into.
So, as you know very well, New Mexico, our economy relies on oil and gas development. How has the methane rule, or are Colorado and New Mexico sort of comparable in the breadth of the industry, the size of the industry? And has that rule in Colorado, how has that affected Colorado's production, Colorado's revenues?
Right. New Mexico and Colorado are different. Everybody knows that. For one thing, the green chili in New Mexico is much, much superior to the green chili in Colorado. The oil and gas industry is also a much bigger part of the economy in New Mexico than it is in Colorado. So, Colorado has a larger and more diverse economy than New Mexico does. And so that, that's important to keep in mind when you're looking at these rules. However, the oil and gas sector in Colorado, just by itself, has not been adversely impacted by these rules. In fact, you could argue that it's actually, I think in some ways been improved because it's more efficient and it has the ability to kind of show that it's, doing its part to reduce its emissions to these global markets.
So prior to working for an NGO, you worked for the state of New Mexico during the Richardson administration. And I'm curious what you think in terms of when it comes to climate change, when it comes to economic diversification, when it comes to the future of the fossil fuel industry, how much of a role does state policy play versus federal policy? And do states really have paths forward if they want to be taking on sort of these big sorts of changes and challenges?
Yeah, I think you need both. It's sort of belt and suspenders. And so there's a role absolutely for strong federal regulation, like I think we're going to see under President Biden, in making sure that there's a floor that everyone has to abide by. For instance, there's a lot of oil and gas that comes out of states that probably aren't at the state level ready to act. I look across the border to Texas in that regard, and you're probably going to need the federal regulators to step up if you want to get after the problems that exist there. But there's also a role for states like New Mexico and Colorado and Wyoming and other places that have shown a willingness to kind of go beyond that floor and to show real state level leadership as well. And so that's what we're starting to see, with these rules from the Oil Conservation Division that are going to limit venting and flaring. Those should be finalized next month. And then we're watching really closely to see what happens with the New Mexico Environment Department's draft rules, which are probably going to go to hearing later on this summer.
Don Goldstein, thanks so much for joining me today.
Great to see you, Laura. Thanks.
One of the first actions President Biden took upon taking office was to issue an executive order indefinitely pausing all new oil and gas leasing on public lands. This week, Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham sent the president a letter asking for some relief on that front, although she stopped short of any direct ask. This is the governor's latest tightrope act between moving the state towards more renewable energy sources while not turning her back on the oil and gas industry, which is so important to the state's economy, as you know. Senator Feldman, what do you make of the governor's request?
Well, she's asking for an exemption. She's asking for an exemption, yet the pause that the president put on the oil and gas leasing had already expired on Monday. So the question was really kind of moot because it had already expired. But nonetheless, I think she really wanted to make a statement. That's what she was doing, rather than seeking real relief, which would be very difficult. Although now with Deb Haaland, it might be possible for certain specific exemptions, like Chaco Canyon, for example. But I think that, yes, she's trying to walk that line between the oil and gas industry and alternative energy and climate change, which she's very committed to. And her regulations and her regulatory policy has really proven that, with controls on methane gas emissions. Right. And, and other measures, the ETA, setting a goal of carbon neutrality. I think it's by 2045. And that's pretty aggressive. And I think she wants to let the Biden administration and the world know that we are pressing forward here and deserve some special consideration.
Merritt, interestingly, 55% of the state's wells and 63% of overall production are on federal lands. I mean, this is really a serious issue for New Mexico. Should we get special consideration here, given those numbers, those percentages?
Well, again, I think Senator Feldman's points about context, I don't know. It would be nice to get, of course, it would be nice for New Mexico to always get special consideration for everything. But the 60-day moratorium has sunset. It has not been renewed. And so it's not clear what the final policy will be. Also to be noted that the existing leases we have are set for 4 years. So it's not like production is stopping. Probably a larger impact on the Permian Basin has been some of the severe weather we've had.
Yeah,
that may be impacting oil prices.
Legit.
And
yep.
One of the most interesting bellwethers, if you will, to how there are 3 states that really have the most impact from fracking. It's Wyoming, New Mexico, and Alaska. And Alaska's 2 Republican senators voted to confirm Deb Haaland as Interior Secretary. So I think that's also an indicator that perhaps these Western oil-producing states are not as concerned about the Biden administration's fracking plan as the oil and gas industry makes it seem. I'm glad. I think it was good PR for the oil and gas industry. I think it's important that the leader of an oil-producing state in an economic crisis show that resolve, that she does support industry and she does understand that we cannot do without these revenues right now. I'm sure how meaningful it was.
Yeah. Senator Snyder, talk about numbers. Our Department of Finance Administration predicts an estimated loss of $709 million over the next 4 years if there is a 10% decline in our oil production levels. That's a lot of money. In fact, let me give you the quote from our governor. Quote, financial losses of that magnitude could have real impacts on our ability to achieve major goals like universal access to early childhood education. There's serious issues here with this loss of money of this magnitude, isn't there?
Yes, there is. One of the things that concerns me a little bit is everybody keeps talking about, well, the oil and gas has all these leases in reserve. Well, they do, because you buy ahead. You don't wait till the day of and buy. But with that comes, when you're trying to get the oil and gas above ground, there are other kinds of leases that you have to have. And the moratorium, even though it has ended, did not exclude those kinds of leasing, like roads and access and things like that, into types of equipment that's needed. There were no exemptions for those things. So virtually it did stop what leases are held by the companies right now. I'm very concerned. I admire the governor for asking. As we've said, it's a day late and a dollar short, kind of. But I really am concerned long-term about what we're going to do with oil and gas. And it's, I would like to see us, and I always have, and this has nothing to do with our past president, but I think I would love to go back to seeing America totally independent, that we don't have to buy any more foreign oil or gas because we've got the reserves here. So I'm very concerned. And just as a side note to the fact that the 2 senators from Alaska voted, don't forget, look at their population and the number of indigenous constituents he has, as well as the oil and gas. So I think there was a little bit of play in that as to what the real decision was. So I leave this with one thing to say. I'm still very concerned about the future of oil and gas in New Mexico. And therefore, I'm concerned about education. I'm concerned about childcare, all of those things. So I have my concerns.
Senator Grego, meanwhile, the marketplace is speaking, meaning folks are pulling up and going to Texas because they have very little federal land there and they can drop a well wherever they want, basically. Is this a problem for us? I mean, when you really think about how much of our land mass is under federal control, it's a difficulty.
You know, I think that our dependence and on this industry, any credible research, including from the oil and gas industry, is there's a finite amount of time left for us to make this transition. And I know we're used to clinging like grim death to the industry. Nobody wants it to go away tomorrow. We realize there's got to be a reasonable transition period, but I think that all of us who are sort of apologists for the industry and so dependent on this for our state revenues, including things we care about, I think we're going to be on the wrong side of history, because I think there's a bigger existential crisis, which is climate change, which our kids and grandkids are going to be looking at us to solve. And nobody's saying shut those wells down tomorrow. I think what the tight wire that not just Governor Lujan Grisham, but the president and even Secretary-elect or Secretary Degnan, I guess she's secretary now,
right?
Holland's going to have to walk is how do you help with that transition, but also really push to make this transition as quickly as possible, not just for the good of the planet, but because our economy is so incredibly dependent on these fluctuating revenues.
That's
and
right.
we have to bite the bullet and make the change. And so I hope that we will all have the courage to do that, regardless of party, regardless of region.
Appreciate that. That's the last word there. Thanks for having us, having these important conversations. Keep up with the show throughout the week on Facebook, Twitter, you know it as, and Instagram. Along with all of you, I was truly horrified by what transpired in Atlanta earlier this week that saw 6 Asian American women murdered among 8 total. While not all the victims were Asian, there's already some home-based juries trying vainly to call this anything else than what it was, a targeted hate crime. If this was an isolated incident, it would be horrible enough, but the lit fuse of demonizing Asian people or Americans of Asian descent has reached its moment. Words matter, especially for those in positions of influence. By any standard of fairness, our Asian American brothers and sisters have been quietly fighting a battle with few allies at their back. It's time for that to change. Thanks again for joining us and for staying informed and engaged. We'll see you again next week in Focus.
Funding for New Mexico in Focus provided by the McCune Charitable Foundation and viewers like you.